Hi, this is John Wren. This is the Startup Show. We're here each Friday at noon Mountain Daylight Time to talk about startup. If you'd like to be on the show as a guest in a future show, we're going to really start working hard at having a panel of guests on each week to talk about how they started and field your questions. If you'd like to be on the show and talk about your own startup experience, give us a call anytime during the week at 303-861-1447. It's 303-861-1447. This is a startup show. Talk about startup, not just of a business, although that's a primary emphasis, but the thing we have in common is startup, starting a new campaign, a new project, could be a new career of some sort that you've decided to do a different kind of work. And so how do you get from that initial thought to your first day on the job, your first sale, that type of thing? We look at what actually happened, not theory about what should happen, although we do have a bit of a theory, they say good theory is based on experience and experience is based on bad theory. And there's been a lot of bad theory out about startup. And I've certainly learned lessons trying to listen to the SBA and doing it their way, and it's a disaster. I think it is for most people. And most have just learned to ignore it, except the federal government. They keep shoveling money into the SBA, and they ought to get entirely out of startup. I think they may do some good in disaster relief and maybe financing larger businesses to help them grow. But as far as zero to first sale, they've just about killed the country. You know, we used to be a nation of shopkeepers. We've become a nation of clerks working for Starbucks and Walmart. It's a sad thing. You know, it used to be a very viable option to start your own business, and we've rigged the system to work against the little guy just getting started. If you're big, you have billions, you not only can run for president, but you can get lawyers and accountants and shovel through all the crap that people have to put up with. But it's not impossible. If you have a good CPA, he'll help you decide, he or she will help you decide if you need a lawyer. And then you start, before you spend a significant amount of time or money, it's not a bad idea to bounce it off of a good CPA. And a good CPA won't tell you if it's a good idea or not, but they'll help keep you legal. You may need to see a lawyer, very often not. And they'll also help you see the financial implications of what you're getting into. And they will probably be very discouraging. So wait until you're just about ready to go. Maybe you even have your first check from your first customer. You're about to deposit it. Find a good CPA. How do you find a good CPA? Ask your friends who have a successful small business who they use and if they like them. And if they do, call them up. Good way to get through is, are you accepting business clients? Do you have a business? Yes, that's what I want to sit down and talk to you about, because once you have that idea and you're serious, you have a business. So get with a CPA, bounce it off of them, try to find a good banker, a good insurance person, and maybe a sales consultant. Once you've got your first few sales, they can help you make it into a system, but don't let them change what you're doing. You had a genius in your first customer or two, which you should have before you get anybody to help you with sales. And if you can't do that, you need to learn to sell yourself. Get a part-time job. Telemarketing can be a fantastic experience, and you can get the job in about an hour, and you call, go down, sit down, start selling on the phone, and learn how to sell while you're on someone's payroll and not when you're paying all the expenses yourself. So learn to sell, but look for that idea. People say, well, the ideas are a dime a dozen. And in a way, that's true. The idea alone is a dime a dozen. But the idea that is implemented is a rare commodity in our world today. So many people get discouraged, especially when they go into that SBA office. So we try to offer a little bit of an alternative here each Friday. Now, today we're going to talk about hyper-local marketing. Hyper-local, if you do an egram reader search on Google, you can look at the usage of words and what word they're using the most, what word they're using the least. Startup is more used now, but entrepreneur, you put those two in, it's interesting to see the history of them. But hyperlocal doesn't even come up. There aren't enough uses of hyperlocal to even count. And it's a term some people are familiar with. Hyperlocal was hot for a while in publishing, but all of publishing seems to have cooled off, and the World Wide Web gives us the delusion that we have a worldwide audience, when actually people living right next door may be the best prospect. So hypertension means a high level of tension. Hyper this, that, and the other thing. Hyper comes up quite a bit if you look at it on the Ngram viewer. But hyper local, very local, and I think actually there was the carpenter 2,000 years ago who had this insight. He said, your neighbor, the person that lives right next door to you, or the person you're already working with. Your hyperlocal can be geographical, the people that live in your apartment building, and your next door neighbors, your local community, or it can be where you work. It could be the people you ride on the bus with. Those familiar strangers, you say hello, you know if they were on vacation but didn't show up, and they tell you about it next week. Well, this hyperlocal, dealing with people that are already part of our life, is something that we're forgetting about. And I do it myself. That's one reason I wanted to talk with you about it, because I've got to start doing this myself. There's somebody that probably wants to be on the show right now. Sorry, if you're watching, call back Monday through Friday. We've got plenty of time to talk generally, but just not from 12 to 12:30 each Friday. We're on the air with the Startup Show each week. And I'd love to have you on the show next week, and call just like that person did, hopefully leaving a message. If you want to be on the show with me next week, give me a call, 303-861-1447. This is John Wren, and we're sponsored by the Small Business Chamber of Commerce, Inc., which is really just me and about 8,000 of my friends. If you look on our online presence, it's substantial. And to join, all you have to do is to introduce yourself to us online. And you can do that on our website, smallbizchamber.org, where you can also find a repeat of these instructions on how to become a member. So smallbizchamber.org, or our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/small business chamber, divided by period. Small period, business period, chamber on Facebook. Introduce yourself, like the page, and then share it with your friends, along with a note encouraging them to do the same thing. If you'll do that, you're a member if you say you're a member. Now, we won't tell anyone unless you do. The other thing that we are now encouraging people to do is to go to our meetup site, and that's going to be our directory. Every once in a while, we're going to print it up and make it available on Amazon. And if you'll go to meetup.com/small biz chamber, B-I-Z, small biz chamber, just like our website, small biz chamber, except it's hyphenated, small-biz-chamber. And if you become a member there, you'll be in the next directory that we print. And when we print, I'm not sure, but it's coming up. So, and if you want your name out of there, go and take it out if you don't care to be a part of what we're trying to do. But hyperlocal is on my mind, that person that lives next door, because that's really what politics is. It's the people that live next door. A famous politician one time said, all politics is local. And that is really true, because when it boils down, it's those local conversations I have with my neighbors where I live, with my neighbors at work, with my neighbors in transit, the familiar strangers that I know well, and we say, so what'd you think of the debate? And we talk and process. And we're losing that. We're cocooning, isolating, less and less conversational with our neighbors. How many of us even know the names of our next door neighbors? Now, you probably do. I know who they are. Spelling their last name might be a problem for me. But we're encouraging the revitalization, the hyper-local revitalization of our communities. And, I think it needs to start with the newspapers. I went to a event that the Denver Post put on last night. It was a debate between two good people arguing two sides of a ballot issue that's on this coming November. And it was kind of embarrassing because there was no attempt to control the crowd. And, they've learned that when you're on television, which they really were, it was put out over the internet. So it gave the feel of a substantial news source producing something, and the one side was just drowned it out. Now, whether you agree with that side or not, it was unfair. And the Denver Post should apologize for it, in my opinion. And they also should apologize for not cooperating with the local community newspapers. I was with one of the top publishers here in the Denver metro area, and he spoke directly to Dean Singleton and said to Dean Singleton, why don't we cooperate? We can produce local news for you. And Singleton just turned up his nose at it. But a large daily that doesn't communicate or cooperate with the local community newspaper is making a huge mistake, and it's hardly done at all now. So let's ask our newspapers to give us a good example of the kind of cooperation that we all need to have. Now, we're going to have Republicans and Democrats, who knows, maybe libertarians after this year. If they become a major party, maybe it becomes a three-party system, but there's always going to be major parties. Minor parties are a fact of life. They almost always have the unintended consequence of doing exactly which they would least like to do. Ralph Nader, who did he get elected? Not the Green Party candidate. He got George Bush elected. The father comes out of the voting bush and says, go, Ralph, go. And I'm sure there'll be people coming, Trump's father, is he still alive? I have no idea. He doesn't say much, but he must not be. Well, of course not. But Trump himself might say, go Gary Johnson, go. Now, if Johnson, the libertarian candidate, starts seeing a dramatic jump in his poll numbers, things could change entirely, and he may become the people's choice. There'll be a tipping point at which, Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you. That's where Gary Johnson is right now. Then they get angry at you. He's getting closer. And then they agree with you. And if Gary Johnson would win the election, it's going to really turn the head of a lot of people towards the Libertarian Party. Now, I was disappointed last week. I went down to the west steps of the Capitol. I thought the Libertarians would be there in force, just a handful of people. It's a little bit embarrassing. I felt bad for those. Now, maybe I left too early. Maybe the crowd came later. I hope so. But local Libertarians, the problem is it's like herding cats. I think it's a good philosophical discussion group. It raises some interesting points. I certainly don't agree with all of it. To Gary Johnson, I don't agree with everything that he says, but his view on abortion is radically wrong in my opinion, but that's not an issue right now. And he would pick the right Supreme Court justices in my opinion. Now, I could be wrong about that too. And if I am, I'll know by November. And I will make a public announcement of who I'm supporting. I can't make up my mind between Hillary and Trump. I'll watch the next election. And if Trump goes crazy like he has in the past and he just can't control himself, that's going to tell us something. So I think these debates actually are the most important events that we've had in our country in a while. And I'm looking forward to it. I watched the last one of the Denver Press Club. What a fun thing that is, to go down with the press, the reporters for the most part, people on the staff, plus everybody else. They sort of let anybody in the Denver Press Club. Now, what we should do is have a 5-state press club. It should expand and be for the benefit of Wyoming and Utah and New Mexico and the surrounding states, maybe. And I've got to believe if they band together, it could stop the slide. And they need to band together and take a stand with the daily newspapers and insist that there be some common why distribute the local community newspaper separate from the daily? With the computer now, they can, in a very sophisticated way, blend these things. The Denver Post is trying to do their own neighborhood edition and doing an extraordinarily poor job of it. I know they keep working at it, and it's a good idea to have a local community newspaper once a week. In Greenwood Village and Cherry Hills, it's called The Villager. And why not insert that in the Denver Post? Most of the people there read the Post, they get the Villager inside, let them each fight it out for the ad revenue. Helps them both. So cooperation is going to be what causes the future to happen for us. And we may not have a future if we don't learn to cooperate. Newspapers could set the standard. And also the Republicans and the Democrats in each neighborhood need to start cooperating. We have a Colorado caucus, singular. It's the entire state. It's all the people in the state that want to participate. It's more like a jury trial than anything else, although it's a huge jury. There are 3,000 neighborhoods. Each one of these local neighborhoods has a meeting of the Republicans and the Democrats, and if they become a major party and they want to, the Libertarians, if we become a three-party system. And you get with the like-minded people in your neighborhood, and people say it radicalizes. Well, just the opposite is the true. What it does is it actually is a tempering force, because when you're with a neighbor, looking them in the eye, even when it's Donald Trump, did you see how much more mild-mannered he was with Hillary Clinton in the same room? And that's what happens in a caucus. You don't get this crazy name-calling for the most part. And if there is some lunatic there that is doing that, generally, they're gone by the next cycle. And people tolerate it for a couple of hours, and he gets drunk and passes out or whatever. But, there are people that are difficult to deal with. And if they're your neighbor, you've got to accommodate them in other ways, too. So the caucus, every 2 years, neighbors come together with the people that are most like-minded, come up with the best candidates they can. And this presidential primary is a bad idea because it substitutes this neighbor process for watching ads and going in and pulling a lever. That's all it is. And you pull a lever for the candidate, you have no idea who the delegates are going to be. Through the caucus system, you vote on the delegates and you send people. Now, they may say, I'm Trump, I'm pledged to Trump, but they don't have to. And you can run as an uncommitted delegate, and it's often done by people that are influential. And you can be influential in your own neighborhood. If you're a reasonable person, you've never been involved, you go in 2 years, or it's less than 2 years now, but a year and a half, you go again, and then back in 2 years for the presidential race. Very likely, if you want to, you could get chosen as a delegate to the county convention, to the state convention, and if you really wanted to the national. If you started now, going to the national is a realistic thought. Now, if you vote for the presidential primary, forget it. The party bosses will send their pets. And it's an outrageous grab for power that both party leaders, Rick Palacio, Steve House, should be ashamed of themselves. They are really damaging Colorado with this approach, pushing the presidential primary. It's not a good idea. Now, there are reasonable people and there are unreasonable people, and people pushing for the presidential primary in Colorado are unreasonable. Now, we formed Small Business Chamber of Commerce, Inc., which is me. We've formed Save the Caucus, savethecaucus.org. Go on, I'm the registered agent right now. I've got some volunteers. I've got people helping me. And we've stopped this presidential primary idea twice in the legislature. And now here it comes onto the ballot with crazy Proposition 107 and 108. I'm not going to bore you to tears with it here, but you can get more information on cocaucus.org, cocaucus.org. That's Save the Caucus. And what I will tell you here is just vote no on 107 and 108. They will kill the caucus. One of them puts a presidential primary in place. The other one mix masters the primary election. Anybody votes for anybody. It's sort of like you know, if you're a member of the Kiwanis Club, you're going to let the Rotarians come in and elect your officers. That's what Crazy 107 does. It's been put together by a multimillionaire that formed a committee, and you know what the committee does? It's the, you know, the camel's the horse that was invented by the committee, and it's an abomination. They should withdraw it. If Kent 30 at the DeVita board should look hard at it. If he doesn't get reasonable, in my opinion, he should be fired for, if nothing else, it's distracting him from the tough job he has at DeVita. He's done a pretty good job, but now he does this. He comes in and wants to tell people of Colorado what we should get rid of here. Why doesn't he learn to use the system first? You know, he could be a good leader in his local caucus. He's probably just, you know, not humble enough to start on the local level and then become a county leader, and he could become a state chairman and do a lot of good. I don't even know how he's registered. But one party or the other could use his kind of leadership, and then the other party competes, and it's through that series of competitions. But here's where cooperation comes in, and where hyper-local comes in. When we live next door to people, we have to forget this idea that the other person, the other party, the other candidate is evil. That is crazy. Every candidate is doing the best they can. Every party is doing the best they can. They're calling it like they see it. And once the election is held, whoever is elected represents all of us. Now, in some states, they actually have a ceremony after the elections. And in one state, I've forgotten which one, in the South, I think, they actually have a ceremony where they literally bury a hatchet and they put aside their differences. And now when you go down to the Capitol in your state, or you go back to Washington, the elected representatives are there representing the entire constituency that elected them. So if it's a senator, now of course it comes near election time, things get a little bit more competitive, direct competition. But what we have now is crazy, and it's caused by hatred. We need to go back to, you know, when Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, he was talking local politics. We need to get back to that. And we're going to try to help do that with Save the Caucus. We're forming an educational activity. It will not be political. We're not going to take a position on issues or candidates. We're going to call it something like, whatever the name of your neighborhood is, Caucus Club. I was at one time president of the Denver City Club. That was formed in the 1920s and has done Denver a lot of good. Until recently, it's become a bit partisan, in my opinion. I'm an outsider looking in now. I might misperceive it, but they seem to resent it whenever I show up there and want to share my ideas. They kind of seem to make up their own mind, at least the leadership. And that's old information. I haven't been there for a long time. But the Denver City Club idea is that we seek to inform, not reform. And these neighborhood caucus clubs will very much do the same thing. And I'm looking for a few good leaders, 6,000 to be exact, because we'd like to have a Republican and a Democrat leaning, but inactive Republican and Democrat in every caucus, and a Libertarian if we can get them. And that those three people become the catalyst for forming a small group that will meet on a regular basis, seeking to inform, not reform, and to hold some sort of event on the off year that teaches people how to use the caucus and how to participate. Because if you wait until right before the caucus, it is too late. If you want to participate in the 2020 presidential election and you want to use the caucus system to make a difference, you haven't been involved, the starting time is now. Pick a party. I don't think it makes any difference. They're megaphones. You don't take marching orders from a party. Now, the party bosses will try to make you believe that you're going to take marching orders from them. That's why they want to have the presidential primary, which they know kills the neighborhood caucus, because then they're issuing marching orders. Honest John Shafroth in 1910 held the legislature in special session in August in that hot, un-air-conditioned state capitol building, and he wouldn't let them leave until they'd adopted the Colorado caucus. And it immediately reformed a Tammany Hall type situation we had here in Denver. And it got out from underneath the party bosses because the Neighborhood caucus puts the rank and file in charge of the party bosses rather than it being the other way around. That's why the party bosses are pushing for the presidential primary. They want to kill the caucus so that they won't even have to have neighborhood meetings. It's written into this 107 that if they decide to, they just go straight to the convention, get people there however they want to, and it's just kind of under control. Well, the grassroots in Colorado has served us well since 1912. When we first had that, 1912, they tried to kill it. They've been trying to kill it ever since 2002. Now, some of the people that try to kill it may be just misinformed. And Kent 30 may have just been misinformed. And if so, he needs to take a hard look at what he's doing and withdraw 107. And if not, I really encourage his board of directors to look hard at what he is doing. It's doing great damage to Colorado, in my humble opinion. And I guess it's not so humble. I'm saying it that way. But Kent 30, he is the president of DaVita. You know, they were in big trouble. He had some very aggressive management ideas. He spoke at the University of Denver, Voices of Experience. You can look at it online. And, you know, I don't know, maybe if he did a state convention, the way that they do their company meetings might help whichever party was able to lure him in. I guess he's probably unaffiliated right now. The unaffiliates are very welcome to participate in this caucus club idea, because an intelligent unaffiliated voter will realize there is a need for the two parties to be able to do their work well, or it doesn't matter if you get the vote or not. And right now in Colorado, you know, they make a big thing. If you're unaffiliated and you like a candidate in the primary, isn't it unfair you can't vote for him? Well, that's just a big lie. You can vote for him. It takes about 15 seconds to change from unaffiliated to either Republican or Democrat. You vote in the primary election and then change it back to unaffiliated. And if you're not a party worker, if you're not actively involved with your political party, I think you should be unaffiliated, because it gives you the choice then of voting in either one of the primaries. So why do it? This 107 sort of does that, but instead it tears down the walls between the parties. And I think they have some sort of crazy idea that we're all going to be just one big happy family. But when you have people living together, there have been ways of organizing our thinking developed so that we can make a decision and move on. Part of this comes from the government trying to do too much. You know, there are so many things where private enterprise would do a far better job. Denver right now is trying to develop low-income housing, and they're sort of acting like the condo developer. This Voices of Experience at DU had Michael Hancock come in with Panasonic's local representative, who seems to have Mayor Hancock in his pocket. And they talk about smart cities. And, you know, Mayor, as you're talking about smart cities, on University, the buses aren't running. It used to be the buses would run till late at night. They stopped running about 6:30 now on University Boulevard, the 24 bus. Mayor, why don't you take a look at that? The poor bus service. You know, this light rail is a joke. I voted against it. I use it all the time now. You know, I guess if I was Donald Trump, I'd get criticized for that I was against the light rail, but now I ride the light rail. Well, once it's there, you know, I'm going to take advantage of it. But I had to move to do it. I live right on the light rail line, and it saves me a lot of money. But for Denver, it's killing us. You know, if you, a chart was just released in the Wall Street Journal day before yesterday, and it shows Denver right at the bottom of the pile in what we're doing with mass transit. It's outrageous. Mayor, look at mass transit. Forget the smart city and this stuff. I think maybe you have the ability to be a good mayor, but you're not being a good mayor now when you're focusing on the wrong things. Now, the caucus has nothing to do with the mayoral race. I think that should be changed. I think the mayoral race should become partisan. Now, my Republican friends will say, well, that means we'd never serve. I'm not so sure. You know, we need some good leadership. And I think Sue's a good leader. I think she could lead Denver out of the doldrums, because I think there are a lot of people that would like to be a Republican in Denver County, but they just haven't been asked. I was state chairman of college Republicans, and on a college campus, you get a chance to organize the campus, and you start over every year because there's a turnover of students, and you have to keep rebuilding. It's like what we've got in the caucus system made out of sand. It's building these sandcastles, and it's a great practice. There are a lot of people that have done that, that party leaders have held out, that they don't open their arms to this new, fresh leadership. And who gets hurt by this presidential primary and killing the caucus are our young people. You know, the powerful people like it because it gives them even more power, but who gets locked out are the young, bright people. So for their sake, vote no on 107, 108. Let's bring back the hyper-local Colorado caucus. It's on its knees right now because of the extraordinarily poor leadership from Steve and Rick. You know, they're on TV the weekend before the caucus saying we should get rid of the caucus when they should have been rallying the troops and trying to make it a wonderful experience, bring in this fresh blood, these young people that showed up for the very first time and had such a terrible experience. Steve and Rick should resign immediately, or if they don't, their executive committee should kick them out. And let's get on with the process of building something we can be proud of, and then come together after the election and pull together. And in our representative democracy, those are our representatives, and we don't just attack the other party immediately. This negative campaigning has to stop. And maybe that includes me talking about Mayor Hancock. I apologize, Mayor. I'm sure maybe you think you're doing the best job, but that's not where you should focus your effort. Let's focus it on city services. And what can you do to encourage developers? Yeah, Elsie Fullenwider was part of the material to promote the Panasonic event at DU, and then he's nowhere to be seen. So you sort of imply he's the developer. My hunch is he's taking a big step back, and probably rightfully so. Let's get Denver to the point where it's friendly towards business. It's not right now, in my opinion. I think it very easily could be with you, Mayor, and I'd like to sit down and talk with you about it. And how business has helped is not what you think, I don't think. But I have some ideas. I'd love to share them with you. Well, we'll be at the Panera Bread Cafe this afternoon. Idea Cafe Startup Workshop is every Friday. It's a demonstration group. We'd like you to see it and take it back to your community. None of it is protected as intellectual property. We've had people come and start similar groups, and that's great. Maybe they'll come up with a better idea. But for right now, we do the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop, 4:30 at the Lodo Panera Bread, 16th and Market. That's each Friday at 4:30. And then right after at 6 o'clock, there's a Socrates Cafe at the same place there at the Lodo Panera. There's a Socrates Cafe Saturday evenings at the University of Denver in the old Penrose Library. They call it the Anderson Academic Commons now. And join us for one of those. It helps sharpen your critical thinking skills, I think. And it does it through a fun conversation. There's nothing to read in advance. We share our own thoughts. Most of us read, and that helps form our thoughts. After we hear other people's thoughts, and they may say a little bit about where it comes from, you know, we may go read something after the meeting, but there's no homework assignment. Small Business Chamber of Commerce Startup Method, Recover, Root and Branch is on Mondays. People are interested in the spiritual way of living, and we say we're practicing spiritual startup. So if you'd like to know more about that, Root and Branch on Mondays at 4:30, 1311 York Street on the 3rd floor. All this and more is on smallbizchamber.org. We'd like to help you duplicate this in your local neighborhood, in your state. Who knows? Someday maybe in other countries. But for right now, if we just do it in Colorado, I'll be happy. So if you're in Colorado, can visit us at 4:30 this afternoon or any of these meetings. We'd love to have you. They're free and open to everyone. I've got a little book on startup, and it's hard to make a living on a 99-cent book. But sometimes it causes someone to call me, and maybe I can help you in other ways as well. We're going to try to monetize this in some way because I'm probably the only person that would work this hard for free. And it's been suggested to me we need to take it to the next level. So we're forming a board of advisors that might become a board of directors. If you'd like to serve, or if I can help you in any way, don't hesitate to call. Number, John Wren, Small Business Chamber of Commerce. Save the Caucus, 303-861-1447. Well, that's our 30 minutes. We'll be back next Friday, 12 o'clock. If you'd like to be on the show with me next week, give us a call, 303-861-1447. So until next week, this is John Wren signing off and reminding us all that this life is very short. Let's go get started. Thanks for watching.